Michael Turner never imagined that one simple decision, a decision made in secret, would destroy the life he'd spent 20 years building. He was 45 years old, a construction supervisor from Sacramento, California. To anyone who knew him, Michael was ordinary, dependable, quiet, a husband who worked hard and came home tired. But on a warm Thursday evening, in late June 2018, he stopped at a convenience store on his way home and bought a power jackpot ticket worth $20. He didn't think much about it at first. The next morning, as he poured his coffee and checked the numbers online, the screen froze him in place. Every number matched. He blinked twice, scrolled again. The ticket in his hand was worth $17 million. For several minutes, he couldn't breathe. His first instinct was joy, pure childlike disbelief. Then, as reality sank in, another feeling pushed through: fear. His marriage to Lisa had been cold for years. They'd grown apart, arguing about money, her spending, his long hours. Divorce had been a topic more than once. And in that instant, a thought crossed his mind: quiet, dangerous, impossible to ignore. He told no one. Michael hid the ticket inside an old wallet beneath a stack of work boots in the garage. He called the state lottery office, pretending to be a friend of the winner, asking about claiming procedures. They told him the basics: taxes, annuity options, public disclosure. He realized that if he claimed the prize under his real name, his life would become a headline, and so would Lisa. That night, as Lisa talked about overdue bills and their daughter's college fund, Michael nodded, but barely heard her. His mind was somewhere else, designing a plan. He could wait. He could claim the ticket after the divorce was final. The thought made his stomach tighten, yet he convinced himself it was fair. After all, she didn't support him emotionally anymore. She mocked his dream of financial independence. He told himself she'd waste the money, that he deserved to protect it. Over the next weeks, Michael Sepp's behavior changed. He became distant, quiet, careful with his phone. He met secretly with a lawyer, a young man named Brian Cole, who specialized in family law. Michael didn't mention the lottery. He simply said the marriage was over. Irreconcilable differences. Brian explained the process: petition, financial disclosure, division of assets, alimony. Michael signed everything calmly, his heart pounding each time he heard the word assets. Lisa, meanwhile, was blindsided. When the divorce papers arrived, she cried for hours, then called Michael, begging to understand. He stayed cold, saying it was better this way. In her mind, he had fallen out of love. She had no idea that, hidden beneath their garage dust, a slip of paper worth millions was waiting to change everything. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. The settlement was modest: shared house proceeds, Michael's truck, Lisa's car, and some savings. She moved into a small apartment, struggling to start over. Michael waited exactly 1 more month before taking the ticket to the state lottery office. When the clerk verified the numbers, a camera flash captured his shaking hands. A week later, newspapers announced the new local millionaire. Construction worker wins $17 million power jackpot. The story spread fast. Friends called. Reporters knocked. Relatives appeared. And then, one afternoon, Lisa's sister sent her a screenshot of the article. Lisa froze. Her eyes moved from the headline to the photo. It was unmistakably Michael, her ex-husband, smiling beside a giant ceremonial check. She reread the date. The draw had happened 2 weeks before he filed for divorce. Her hands trembled. She realized he hadn't just moved on. He had hidden a fortune while they were still married. That night, she couldn't sleep. Betrayal burned hotter than the divorce itself. It wasn't just the money. It was the deception, the calculation. She called a friend who worked in a law office. The next morning, she sat across from attorney Valerie Nguyen, sliding the newspaper across the desk. Valerie scanned it, then looked up. "If those numbers are correct, Lisa," she said slowly, "your ex-husband may have committed fraud. In California, all assets acquired during the marriage must be disclosed in divorce proceedings. Lottery winnings count as marital property." Lisa blinked, stunned. "So, I can sue him?" Valerie nodded. "We don't sue. We reopen the case. The court can impose serious penalties for hiding assets. Sometimes they award the entire amount to the other spouse." The possibility hung in the air like electricity. For the first time since the divorce, Lisa felt hope. Not just for money, but for justice. Within days, Valerie filed a motion to reopen the divorce case. Michael received the notice at his new suburban home, a mansion he'd paid for, in cash. Reading the papers, his face drained of color. He called Brian Cole, his lawyer. "They can do this," he said, pacing. "The divorce is done." Brian sighed. "It depends, Mike. Did you acquire the ticket before or after filing?" "Before," he whispered. Brian Sepp's silence was heavy. "Then you were in trouble." News traveled fast. Local media loved the story. Ex-wife claims husband hid lottery millions during divorce. Comment sections exploded. Half the readers called Lisa greedy. The other half hailed her as a hero. Behind the scenes, the legal battle began, a case that would test the meaning of fairness, honesty, and marital trust in the eyes of the law. And at the center of it all stood Michael Turner, the man who thought he could outsmart both his wife and the system. The courthouse in Sacramento buzzed with tension on the morning of the first hearing. Cameras flashed as Michael walked through the doors in a dark gray suit, trying to look composed. Lisa followed minutes later, dressed simply, her eyes sharp but calm. What had begun as a private betrayal was now a public spectacle. News crews whispered about the man who hid $17 million from his wife. Inside the courtroom, Judge Elaine Crawford presided. Known for her fairness and no-nonsense style, she had handled hundreds of divorce cases, but few as sensational as this. When the clerk called the case of Turner versus Turner, she glanced over her glasses at both parties. "Let's proceed," she said. "Mrs. Turner, through counsel, you may begin." Lisa's attorney, Valerie Nguyen, stood and faced the court. Her tone was calm, deliberate. "Your Honor, we are here because my client's ex-husband, Mr. Michael Turner, intentionally concealed a lottery prize of $17 million that he won while still married to her. He filed for divorce days after the draw, and he failed to disclose this asset in every legal document submitted to this court. We intend to show that this concealment was deliberate fraud against both my client and this court." The room stirred. Michael's attorney, Brian Cole, shifted uncomfortably, flipping through his notes. Judge Crawford turned to him. "Mr. Cole," Brian rose. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge that Mr. Turner did win the lottery, we maintain that the funds were not marital property because the ticket was purchased with his personal money, separate from any shared accounts. Furthermore, my client was under significant marital stress at the time and made poor decisions without malicious intent." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Cole, are you suggesting that hiding $17 million was a simple mistake? Brian hesitated. I'm saying it was a lapse in judgment, Your Honor. He regrets his actions deeply. Lisa Sepp's eyes flashed. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. To her, it wasn't a lapse, it was betrayal. Valerie handed a folder to the clerk. Your Honor, Exhibit A. Proof that the lottery draw took place 2 weeks before the divorce filing. Exhibit B. Bank withdrawal receipts, showing the purchase of the ticket. Exhibit C. The California Lottery statement confirming the date and the name on the claim. Judge Crawford skimmed the documents. Her expression hardened. Mr. Turner, she said, you were required by law to disclose all assets obtained during your marriage. Did you, or did you not purchase this ticket before filing for divorce? Michael swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. But that's enough. The judge's stiff tone silenced the room. You may step down for now. As the hearing continued, Valerie painted a picture of deceit, Michael's sudden withdrawal from the marriage, the secrecy, the timing of the claim. She called Lisa to the stand. Lisa's voice trembled at first, but she soon found her strength. She spoke of years of shared struggle, of bills paid late, of how she had trusted Michael even as their marriage cracked. If he had just told me, she said, her eyes glistening, we could have gone our separate ways fairly. But he took everything, not just the money, but 20 years of trust. Her words hung in the courtroom air. Reporters scribbled frantically. When it was Michael's turn, he walked to the witness stand, stiffly, hands clasped. His lawyer nodded to reassure him. Mr. Turner, Brian began. Why didn't you tell your wife about the winnings? Michael stared down at his hands. I thought she said to waste it. We were fighting about money all the time. I just wanted to start over. Valerie stood for cross-examination. Start over, with $17 million that didn't exist before you bought that ticket, while still married to her. He looked up, but his voice was small. I earned it. I bought the ticket. Using marital funds? She asked. He hesitated. Maybe, yes. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Valerie pressed on. So you agree that the money technically belonged to both of you? Michael Sepp's face reddened. I didn't think about it that way. The judge's gavel struck once. Order. As testimony closed, both sides rested. Judge Crawford leaned back, her face unreadable. I'll review the evidence and deliver my decision in 2 weeks. Outside, reporters swarmed the steps. Lisa said nothing, guided by Valerie, through the crowd. Michael, shielded by his attorney, ignored the shouted questions. Do you regret hiding the money? Are you afraid you'll lose it all? At home that night, Michael poured himself a drink, staring out at the backyard pool of his new mansion. The silence felt heavy. He thought of his daughter Emily, who hadn't spoken to him since the story broke. Of Lisa Sepp's voice on the stand. He wondered when greed had replaced love. Lisa, in her apartment, felt a similar weight. She didn't just want the money. She wanted accountability. She wanted him to understand what he Sepp done. Valerie had told her they could win big, possibly the entire sum, but Lisa wasn't sure how she'd feel if that happened. Would it make things right? Could it undo the betrayal? The decision was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Min. Sharp. Michael sat with his hands clasped tightly, eyes on the judge. Lisa Sepp's heart raced. She hadn't slept. Judge Crawford entered and began reading her statement. The courtroom hushed. "This case," she began, "is not simply about money. It is about trust, the foundation of any marriage, and the principle upon which our legal system relies. When one party deliberately conceals assets from another, they not only defraud their spouse, but this court." Michael looked down. "The evidence is clear," the judge continued. "Mr. Turner purchased the lottery ticket prior to filing for divorce. He failed to disclose it as required by law. The concealment was intentional. Under California law, this court has the authority to award 100% of the undisclosed asset to the other spouse as a penalty for fraud." A gasp rippled through the audience. Lisa covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Therefore," Judge Crawford said, "the full amount of the $17 million lottery prize shall be awarded to Mrs. Lisa Turner." Michael Sepp's world tilted. The sound of the gavel felt like thunder. Reporters rushed from the room to broadcast the verdict. Lisa sat frozen, overwhelmed, unsure whether to cry or laugh. As the courtroom emptied, Michael remained seated, staring at the empty bench. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder. "I said, Mom. Sorry, Mike. There rest nothing we can appeal. You violated disclosure laws." The judge followed precedent. Michael barely heard him. He had outsmarted himself, and the cost was everything. That night, Lisa walked along the quiet street outside her apartment. The news had already spread nationwide. Judge awards lottery millions to ex-wife after husband hid winnings. Her phone buzzed non-stop, but she didn't respond. Standing beneath a streetlight, she whispered to herself, "It's over." But inside, she knew it wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. The moment the truth finally outweighed the lies. Weeks passed after the verdict, yet the echoes of that gavel still followed both of them. For Lisa, life had turned surreal. Her face appeared on talk shows, news headlines, social media threads. Everyone had an opinion. Some called her lucky, others called her vindictive, but she ignored the noise. She wasn't chasing attention. For the first time in years, she finally felt at peace. She used the first months after the ruling to get organized. Valerie helped her set up a trust for their daughter, Emily, who was still in college. They arranged payments for tuition, medical insurance, and even a small fund to support Lisa's aging parents. The rest went into long-term investments. Slow, steady, sensible. Lisa didn't want luxury. She wanted stability. And perhaps most importantly, she wanted to live a life that didn't revolve around anger or revenge. Still, there were quiet moments when the weight of it all returned. Sometimes, at night, she'd sit by the window and remember the man Michael used to be, the man who had once stayed up late, fixing a leaky faucet, or who'd driven 3 hours just to pick her up when her car broke down. She wondered if that man had ever truly left, or if he'd simply been buried under years of resentment, fear, and pride. Michael, meanwhile, lived in the shell of his former dream. The mansion, once a symbol of victory, had been seized and sold to satisfy legal fees and court-ordered transfers. The press had turned on him, stories about greed, deception, and the man who lost everything by lying. He avoided the news, avoided people, avoided mirrors. The money was gone, but what hurt most wasn't the loss of wealth. It was the loss of reputation, of family, of the belief that he was a good man who just made one mistake. He tried to rebuild. Found a smaller apartment in the outskirts of town. Picked up work again, as a site supervisor, though now coworkers whispered behind his back. Once, during lunch, a younger worker joked, "You should have split it 50-50ths, man." Michael didn't respond. He just nodded and returned to his sandwich. Late one evening, after another long shift, he found an envelope in his mailbox. It was from Lisa. Inside was a short handwritten note. "I don't hate you, Michael. I never did. I just wanted you to be honest. Take care of yourself. Lisa." He read it twice. For a moment, he thought about calling her, maybe apologizing properly. But he knew some words only made things worse, when spoken too late. He folded the letter and kept it in his wallet, the same wallet where, years ago, he'd hidden the lottery ticket. Months turned into a year. Lisa gradually faded from the media spotlight. She opened a small home design business with a friend and began volunteering at a local shelter that helped women rebuild their lives after divorce. When people asked her about the case, she would smile politely and say, "It was never about the money. It was about being seen, being heard." One afternoon, Valerie stopped by her office. "You know," the lawyer said, "your case is already being cited in legal courses. Judges are using it as an example of why honesty matters in financial disclosures. You've changed more than your own life. You've changed how people think about fairness." Lisa laughed softly. "Then maybe something good came out of it after all." Valerie nodded. It did. Meanwhile, Michael's life slowly regained some sense of normalcy. He learned to live without extravagance. He reconnected with Emily after nearly 2 years of silence. Their first meeting was awkward. A coffee shop on a rainy afternoon. Emily sat across from him, stirring her drink, avoiding his eyes. "Mom says you've far working again," she said. "Yeah," Michael replied, trying to get back on track. There was a long pause. Then Emily asked, "Do you regret it?" "Every day," he said quietly. "Not because of the money. Because I let greed convince me that trust didn't matter. Your mom deserved better. You did too." Emily nodded. "She says doing okay now." "I know," he said. "That's Seps. What matters?" For a moment, they both smiled. A small, fragile piece, bridging the space between them. In time, the story of Michael and Lisa Turner became one of those cautionary tales people shared whenever they talked about love and money, about choices and consequences. It wasn't about villains or victims. It was about how easily people could lose their way when fear and pride cloud judgment. Because the truth was, Michael hadn't been a bad man. He had been an ordinary man faced with extraordinary temptation. He convinced himself that he deserved more, that hiding one secret could fix years of unhappiness. But the lie grew heavier with every passing day until it crushed everything he valued most. Lisa, too, had learned something profound. Justice didn't heal everything, but it restored balance. It reminded her that truth still mattered in a world where deceit often seemed easier. And when she looked back, she realized that the courtroom victory wasn't the end. It was the beginning of her own quiet freedom. The final scenes of their story never made it into headlines. No reporters covered the afternoon when Michael finally walked into a local charity and anonymously donated his last savings account to fund scholarships for trade school students. No one knew when Lisa mailed him that final letter, thanking him for helping pay for Emily's graduation ceremony. Those moments weren't dramatic, but they were real. And maybe that was what redemption looked like. Not a grand apology, but small acts of honesty, one after another. Years later, when Emily had a family of her own, she asked her mother one evening, "Do you ever think about Dad?" Lisa smiled sadly. "Sometimes. Not with anger anymore. We both made mistakes, but life gave us a second chance to learn from them." Emily nodded. "He talks about you, you know. Says you were right. Lisa looked out the window, watching the sun dip below the rooftops. Maybe we both were. Stories, like Michael and Lisa's, reveal more than just courtroom drama. They show how law and morality often intersect in unexpected ways. In California, and most U.S. states, any asset acquired during marriage, even a lottery ticket, is considered marital property. Concealing it in a divorce is not just unethical. It sips legal fraud. Courts have the authority to impose severe penalties, sometimes awarding the entire amount to the wronged spouse. But beyond the law, there's a deeper truth. No victory built on deceit lasts. The human cost of dishonesty, broken trust, lost relationships, self-inflicted guilt, outweighs any financial gain. In every courtroom, behind every file and signature, there are stories like this one, messy, human, full of choices that define who we are. So if there's one lesson to take from this story, it's this: honesty doesn't just protect your finances, it protects your peace. Because in the end, the most valuable thing Michael Turner lost wasn't the $17 million. It was the life he could have kept if he'd chosen truth instead of secrecy.